Do you have a career plan? If you don't, are you worried about it? Well, that is one of the big topics in today's conversation. We are meeting with Natalie, who is a managing director for retail in the logistics industry. Natalie shares all about her area of expertise, her career journey, and some great advice too. We also talk about navigating steep learning curves, how to approach mentoring. We talk about building a network to support your career development. And we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we talk about why it's okay not to have a plan and that you can enjoy the journey. So if that sounds good to you, carry on listening. Natalie and I will see you on the other side. Hello, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Jo.
I'm really excited to do a deep dive into all things logistics and supply chain and so on. So thanks so much. How about we get started with you giving us an introduction into who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Yeah, no worries. So Natalie Froh, I work for DHL Supply Chain, which is the third-party logistics provider, part of Deutsche Post DHL. I am managing director for retail, so I head up in the UK all of our business that we do with retail customers. So people like Sainsbury's, Next, Homebase, Primark, TK Maxx, all of the people that I'm sure everyone's familiar with on the high street.
Wow, brilliant. I bet that's an epic responsibility.
A little one. Yeah, it's a little one. So yeah, it's very emotional when people don't get their food.
I bet. All right, thank you. Now, this is a podcast, Natalie. So if you're a podcast fan, tell us what podcasts you're enjoying right now.
Oh, I love a podcast, especially when I'm out running. It's a good way of clearing the head.
Yeah.
I like a TED Talk.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big fan of a TED Talk, but I also quite like just a mindless comedy. When you're trying to clear your head and, just wind down after a long day, something that just makes you laugh, something silly. I love those as well.
Oh, and which one's making you laugh right now?
Oh, I probably can't say. Probably too rude. Completely inappropriate, but yeah, a good way to wind down. Lots of the comedians now do really good podcasts, don't they? So
yeah, they're good fun. And I think, like you say, I like that there's different things for different moods. Sometimes if I feel like I've been on a business and self-development overload, I'm like, right, I need something lighthearted and fun now.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're just out there walking and laughing along to yourself with your headphones in, I'm sure people wonder what you're doing, but it is a good way to just switch off and relax.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. All right. Well, let's move on to your role. Natalie, talk to us about the common misconceptions of your role. What do, people, friends and family outside of the industry think you're doing all day?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's very little understood about logistics. Actually, I think lots of people wonder, actually, what is it you do? I'm not even sure there's many misconceptions. I think it's like a complete black box that people perhaps don't even know how much work goes on behind the scenes. But everything that you are involved in on a day-to-day basis involves some sort of logistics. I think often it's just thought of moving things. We move something from A to B, a box or a thing or a person, which sounds quite straightforward. And sometimes it's straightforward, but most of the time it's much more complex than that. So it's getting things to where they need to be when they need to be. Normally through all sorts of challenges. Along the way. So, it's getting food into supermarkets, it's getting clothes into stores, it's getting parts onto manufacturing lines. So within DHL, we do the logistics for Jaguar Land Rover for their assembly plants. So we make sure that those parts are on the assembly line at exactly the right time. It's baggage handling in airports.
Oh, wow.
It's patient transport. It's getting medical supplies to people, COVID testing, getting people's COVID tests back and processed and results out. It's enormous. Everything somewhere touches some sort of logistics.
Yeah. Well, that's just so vast, isn't it? Because it's easy to think of it. When you say DHL, I'm thinking about, the parcels that come to my house via DHL, but it is obviously so much broader than that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because when you say you work for DHL, most people think about parcels. That's the number one thing that comes to people's minds. And that is a significant part of what DHL does, as well as running the German postal system. So DHL is part of Deutsche Post. But also we run third-party logistics. So that's, warehousing, transport, all sorts of other movement of things other than parcels.
Yeah. And I have a friend that works for Jaguar Land Rover, and I know that last time we caught up, she was telling me about the massive, supply chain issues with, actually being able to get the parts from China and so on. So I'm sure that that's a massive challenge for you and your team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had all sorts of challenges in the last few years. It started with COVID, and then we had this thing called Brexit, and then somebody parked a boat in the middle of the Suez Canal, which actually trumped all of those, because when you park a boat in the middle of the Suez Canal, you stop the flow of most goods across the world, because so much of it's coming from the Far East through that narrow shipping channel. Just to give you some examples, not this Christmas just gone, but the Christmas before, so Christmas 2019, most of the Christmas products were stuck somewhere behind that blockage in the Suez Canal. Wow. So actually Christmas came and went, and in January, all of the Christmas stock arrived. Christmas trees, Christmas presents, everything Christmas. Oh. So we then had a significant logistics challenge to work out where we're going to put it all.
Yeah.
Containers, millions of items coming into the UK, which you can't sell. Nobody wants to buy a Christmas tree in January. Certainly not for full price anyway, do they? So you've got to store it somewhere until it's Christmas again. We had the same with clothing. Clothing's very seasonal. So if it gets stuck somewhere on the sea and it misses the season, you've then got to store it. But the risk is that actually it goes out of fashion by the time it's come. The season's changed and it's gone out of fashion. So lots of interesting logistical challenges associated with it. And the supply chain around parts and the semiconductors, that was the other one.
The chip shortage.
And that affects all sorts of goods coming in, even microwaves, all sorts of things like that it disrupts. And then when you fix it and it's freed up, all of that comes flowing into the UK, and we have to find somewhere to put it.
Wow. So sounds like there's been a few challenges over the last couple of years.
Keeps us busy. Busy though.
For somebody who is keen to learn more about, I guess, the logistics as an industry, how would you describe that? Give us an overview of the logistics industry.
Okay, so logistics in the UK is a £19 billion industry. So £19 billion spent every year on logistics. about 130 to 140,000 people across the UK employed in, and that's just third-party logistics.
Yeah.
That doesn't even include things like the postal services. That's just in third-party logistics. So, so it's a significant amount of money and people that are involved in it through all sorts of different businesses. So, I work for an organisation that provides outsourced services, but most businesses will have logistics in them across all sorts of different industries. So, companies in manufacturing will have logistics people who are buying parts and organising the shipping of parts in, moving them, the finished product, in food, in supermarkets, in shops, in food producers, in farming, in healthcare. Every single business will have some sort of logistics involved in it. So there's a huge amount of variety and choice in those types of roles.
Yeah, and it almost feels like an umbrella industry that touches every other industry that has a physical product.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It keeps things flowing, it keeps things moving. And if logistics is all about flow, it's all about keeping things flowing. It's a bit like a motorway. As long as it's flowing, everything works nicely. As soon as you have a little bump and things start to stop and come together, that's when it gets really complicated. Anything that requires things to move, and that could be goods, that could be people. Then logistics is really involved in it. Lots of options, lots of different types of logistics.
Yeah, wow. Thank you very much. And if we were to sum it up in one line, what would one of the clients, for example, rely on you for?
Gosh, to keep things moving, I think. That would be it. To keep things moving. And making sure that what people need, whatever that is in the right place at the right time, at the right cost.
Don't forget the cost.
Exactly. Because anything can be in the right time at the right place if you spend a fortune on it. But then that makes things unaffordable.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so if we zoomed in to, I don't know, an average day or an average week in your working life, what would we find you doing?
So I guess for me in my role as an MD, then in an average week, I'd be spending my time thinking about our strategy. So as MD for retail, what is it we are offering for our customers? What is it we're doing to grow new business with new customers? I'd be thinking about how we're developing our products and services. So, how are we tackling issues like sustainability and decarbonisation? How are we tackling some of the labour challenges? How are we tackling things like digitization and automation? How are we rolling out some of those, modernizations to help our customers be more effective and also to help support some of the labour challenges? I would be working with my team and my people around our people and how we're engaging our people and how we're training our people and how we're attracting and retaining people within our business. So, a lot of that kind of big thinking that sets the direction for the team below me. So I have about 10,000 people within my part of the business. So quite a lot of making sure that they all know what direction they're heading in together.
Yeah.
In addition to that, lots of time out with customers, talking to our clients about the challenges they're having, the things that they need, so that when I'm thinking about what we're doing as a business, I'm doing it knowing what our customers need and want from us. And then also out and about in our sites with our colleagues, meeting people. So this morning, for example, I was in one of our offices, and we have an induction training program for all of our managers.
Yeah.
And because I was on site, I was able to go along for 10 minutes and just say, hi, this is what we're about as a business, do a bit of a Q&A. It's good for people to be able to have that time to ask you questions. But it's also great because you get a sense of what's important to people and what they're thinking about. Things like that, which is always good.
Yeah. Wow. A lot then.
Keeps me busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I have a lot of people who help me. I have a lot of people who help me with all of that. So.
For somebody who might be listening or watching thinking, how on earth does Natalie oversee 10,000 people? What would you say to them?
I'd say it's just about listening. It's about listening to people. We're a big organisation, so we have lots of processes and policies that make sure we look after the day-to-day. But people want to feel valued. They want to come to work and feel like you value what their contribution is. And if you can engage people because they feel valued, in the main, it makes it easier because they just get on and deliver it. You listen to people, you look after people, you make them feel valued. Hopefully the rest of it looks after itself. But yeah, it's quite a responsibility.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you. So if we zoom out a little bit, what things might we find you doing less frequently throughout the year?
The less frequent things. So I guess things like budget setting. Once a year you would be involved in a big process that sees you set your budget for the following year. So, what business do you think you're doing? How much revenue are you going to generate? How much profit are you going to make from that? Where's the gap and how are you going to fill it? So how are you going to go out and win new business in order to make sure you're growing? So that would be a sort of annual activity. Things like resource planning. Thinking about what's coming over the next 12 months and how many people you might need and what skill sets you might need and how you kind of build those resourcing and training plans. One of the things that I guess would be less frequent would be startups of new pieces of business. So when you win a new piece of business with a new customer, you want that transition to be really seamless because if it, as we said earlier, logistics is all about flow. So when you're doing any kind of change, if there's any kind of disruption in that service, it's painful for everybody involved. Making sure that those startups are really seamless. So we would do an awful lot of work in advance around project management, training, getting ready, understanding the risks, so that on the day we go live, it's all ready and we're ready. So, we don't do those every day. We'll do a handful of those throughout the year. So those are pretty big events.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you. I can imagine a logistics department is a bit like an HR department in that there's many streams of work within that department, but it all kind of gets bunched in under the term logistics. So again, for those that want to know a bit more, are you able to kind of I guess map out a department in terms of what are the key roles within a logistics department?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. So obviously you've got the people who are performing whatever the activity is. So, if that's running trucks, then you've got the people who are driving those trucks. If it's picking goods within a warehouse in order to package them and put them in the post so that when you've done your online order, they turn up at your house. You've got people who are doing those activities. So you've got the kind of fundamental activity of the service that you're providing. But in order to make that happen, you've got to have all sorts of people around them. So you would have people who do the planning. Mm-hmm. So you have to plan logistics. You can't just let it happen. So those planners would need to know, what's the forecast for volume. So if I'm running a site for Sainsbury's, a food site for Sainsbury's, and we're coming up to Christmas, then we know that in the week before Christmas, everybody's going to want to make sure that every cupboard, every fridge, every space in the house is full of food. The shops are closed for a day, and in the UK, we get massive anxiety that the shops will be closed. So we know in that week running up to Christmas, there's going to be a massive surge on demand for food. So our planners through the year are understanding how much food people are going to want. And at times of the year, it will go up and down. Also in different parts of the country. So for example, in the summer, in Cornwall, you see a massive spike in demand for food because everybody's gone on holiday, and all of a sudden a third of the population of the UK is now in the southwest corner of the UK. So our planners are looking at all those different trends, and they're understanding what the demand on those logistics services is going to be. And that's so that we can make sure we've got the right amount of people in the right place at the right times to be able to do that. Yeah. So you've got the planning team. You'll then have a health and safety team. So very important in logistics that you keep people safe. Many of the activities that we're involved in, we might be operating machinery, forklift trucks, very heavy pallets. We're driving very big trucks around the country. It's really important that we keep our colleagues safe, but we also keep members of the public safe. So you will have people who are managing that health and safety piece. Yeah. You'll have finance people who are checking how much it's costing to deliver these services. You will have HR people because you tend to have a lot of people involved. So you'll need HR support. IT, huge amount of IT. Everything moves based on a system. We don't do very much manually unless there's some sort of emergency. Everything tends to be done on a system. So we'll have all sorts of IT systems that are underpinning things. And also you're seeing a significant increase in automation, so introduction of robotics. So IT, but also engineers who keep all of that automation, all of those robots running. So we'll have those people. We'll have quality people. So people who are measuring the quality of those services. Are we doing it on time? Are we compliant? So if you take, for example, healthcare, if you are involved in the movement of drugs, for pharmaceutical companies, there's all sorts of regulations around that in terms of the temperature that you have to keep them at, the dates on them to make sure that you're moving them so they don't go out of date. There's all sorts of regulations around the handling of drugs. So we'll have all sorts of people who are making sure that we are, we're compliant and we're sticking to all of those performance targets. We'll have customer service people who are, who are dealing with end customers sometimes, particularly in our e-commerce activity where we might have end customers who are impacted. That's just part of the list. There's probably loads more different jobs. If I pulled up our job adverts, I think there'd be hundreds of different jobs that make it happen. There are, lots. That's why there's so many people employed in the industry, because it takes a lot of people in a lot of different roles, not just not just logistics, all of those other support functions that wrap around it.
Yeah, well, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it definitely gives us a broader picture of the different types of opportunities that lie within the logistics function. And as you were talking there, I just I thought of something I think is quite maybe helpful for people to understand the third party reference you use. So I'm quite friendly with one of the managers at a shop in Cambridge called Reese, and I think that they recently outsourced their back office and logistics and operations to Next. So of course that is, I guess, covered by you guys. So I think that almost helps to understand that third party piece, doesn't it? Where a retailer might have previously done it in-house, but it might be more cost effective or efficient for them to outsource it to a company like yours.
Yeah. And I think that Next example is a really interesting one because, what you're seeing is the importance of logistics in that, because actually Next, so with Next, we provide some services for them, but the services we provide them are final mile delivery of their large items. So anything that requires two people to deliver. So if you're ordering furniture, sofas, wardrobes, things like that, then everything that comes out of the warehouse will come through a delivery network that I run. Interestingly, within supply chain, not within parcels, because they're too big. They're too big to be parcels. So it sits within supply chain. So we provide that on behalf of Next. You wouldn't know it was DHL because when the vehicle arrives at your house, it's got Next all over it, and the two people who will be delivering will be wearing Next uniforms. Right. So employed by DHL, run by DHL. But actually, to you, the customer, you will just see it as Next. Next separately so for all of their clothing, they run their logistics in-house. So they run their own e-com operations to service that. And what's really interesting is where you've seen Next use that logistics network almost as a valuable asset, and they're building other brands onto that network. So you've got Reese, recently you had Jules, Victoria's Secrets, Laura Ashley, really phenomenal business, the way that they're harnessing the value that's in that logistics network. And it just serves to demonstrate actually how important logistics is, which is why, a company like Reese has then partnered with Next in order to get that really top end logistics service, because when you're shopping online, you just want it to be seamless and arrive quickly. And have a great returns process if you're like me and you've ordered 3 sizes.
Wow, I think that's brilliant. I think it really helps bring it to life for us. So thank you so much. So tell us what you love most about your job.
Oh gosh, I do love my job. What do I love most about it? I think it's every day is a different challenge in logistics. There's always something going on. It's never smooth. If it was smooth, you wouldn't need logisticians to do it. There's always a challenge. There's always something that you're trying to find a way around. Whether that's a supply chain problem with a canal stuck in the sewers, a boat stuck in the sewers, whether that's, an IT system has gone down, whether that's, an economic downturn and all of a sudden, the volumes are dropping and customers need you to work with them to try and get their costs down so that they can keep their prices competitive for customers, whether that's increases in demand that, all of a sudden you've got to try and resource up to. There's always something going on. It's a real variety. I've worked for DHL for 4 years now, and up until recently, I did a different role, and I used to say to people, I was in that role for just under 4 years, and every 6 months it felt like I had a new job, even though I was doing the same job. every 6 months it felt like I did a new job, because things are changing so quickly. It keeps you keeps you really fresh and interested, and it's very dynamic. You can't get bored in logistics.
So you've got to be somebody, I guess, that loves a challenge, and I guess to some extent thrives on something different being thrown at you every day, and being able to cope with that, because I can imagine it can be very stressful.
Yes. You have to be pretty resilient.
You
have to be pretty resilient, because you won't win them all. You do fail. Sometimes you do fail. It's inevitable. Nobody ever goes to work to fail.
No.
But these things happen because there are so many different factors at play that you can't control, and sometimes they conspire against you. But you just have to keep going. You just have to keep going, and and find a way through it. Which inevitably we do. And then at the end of it, you can say, yes, look at what we did, look at what we did. But it's also, logistics is also very people intensive. Even though we talk about automation and robotics, there are still an awful lot of people involved in logistics. And so I also really enjoy that part of the job. I quite like, being out and about and meeting people. I like to a couple of times a year go back to the floor. I did a great day last year where I went out on delivery with one of our delivery crews up in North Wales, and spent the day with them, and it was it's hard work. It is. It makes my job look really easy. Their job really hard. But it was great. It was great to spend the day with them, get to know them, go and meet some of the end customers, and hear some of the great stories that they had to tell about, how the service that we'd provided had really made a difference for them.
I bet. And I bet,
it's good.
And I bet the employees on the front line really appreciate that kind of thing, when they feel like you're in it with them and you're really listening to, their experiences day to day.
It's really interesting, because often they're really nervous. When people are told, that the MD is going to come and spend the day with you, people tend to be really nervous about it. And what's really nice is when you can go in and very quickly put them at ease. And then have, just have a, at the end of the day, regardless of my job title, I'm still just a person the same as them, who goes to work and wants to do the job. And it's great once you've put them at ease, and at the end of the day for them to reflect back and say, well, we were really nervous about it, but actually we've really enjoyed it. It's nice. It's nice. And that kind of spreads with it, doesn't it? It creates a nice culture within the business that everybody's approachable, and we're all in it together as a team.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Well, how about we go all the way back to the beginning? When you were younger, what did you want to be? What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a young child?
Really, really interesting question. I had no idea. Absolutely no idea. Neither of my parents had been to university. We didn't really talk at home about what I wanted to do when I grew up. I think my mum and dad talked to me a couple of times about maybe being a hairdresser or learning a useful skill, but nothing beyond that. So the school encouraged me to apply for university, and I had no idea what I want to do. So I chose my degree based on two things. One, I was quite good at maths, and two, I did accounting, and it was right at the beginning of the UCAS book. Literally, on reflection, it seems mad. It seems mad, but I had no idea what I wanted to be. And I just thought, I got to the beginning and I thought, that sounds good, and I'm really good at maths. So I'll study accounting.
Yeah.
So I went off to university and I studied 3 degrees in accounting. So I did an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a PhD.
Wow.
Largely because I quite enjoyed being at university. And once I started, I was quite driven to achieve and get as high as I could. And then I still had no idea what I wanted to be. So I stayed at university for a bit longer and lectured for 3 years. And then by my late 20s, I thought, I've got to get a job. I have to get a proper job.
It's time.
Yeah. So that's when I went out into the world of work outside of academia.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was working in the university, but I went outside of that. And by then, I knew I didn't want to be an accountant, and the reason I knew I didn't want to be an accountant was because while I was doing my PhD, I'd spent 6 months working for Raleigh International in Chile as the expedition accountant. So it was accounting, but it was sort of extreme accounting in a tent above the snow line in a mountain.
Wow.
But as part of that, it really made me realise that I was quite a team person, that I liked to be part of a team, that I liked to be part of a team that was really stretching its boundaries and, really trying to strive for something that might look like it was unachievable. And so I kind of learned a bit about me and what kind of ticked my boxes when I got out of bed in the morning. So I went to work for the NHS doing operations performance management, so managing waiting lists and infection control in a hospital. And that's how it started. So still nothing to do with logistics. Logistics came a little bit further down the line from there.
So I really laughed because when you were saying about the UCAS book, I remember doing exactly the same thing. And I remember considering accounting, which is hilarious because I actually did management studies and accounting was one of the modules and it was the only module I failed. So it's a good job I didn't do accounting. And then, shortly after accounting was computer science. And I considered doing that, even though it really wasn't, going to be appropriate for my skill set. So, I can really empathise there.
They need to mix it up, don't they?
Yeah.
Somebody once asked me, what if you'd have started at the back of the UCAS book? Would you have done zoology?
Yeah.
I thought, well, maybe.
Possibly.
I might have done.
And during uni, and then I guess later in the academia work, were you talking to anybody about your future and what you might like to do?
No, but I will tell you a funny story because I met my husband while I was at university doing my PhD, and he was at the time, he was working and he'd gone back for a year to do a master's in logistics. And I remember saying, logistics, what is that? Which he now I work in logistics, he reminds me of. Very often. So I dismissed it quite wrongly early on. I dismissed it. But no, when I was at university studying accounting, everybody was going off to work for accountancy firms for the big six, And I did a sandwich degree. So I did 2 years at uni and then I did a year working. And I worked for Xerox as a finance analyst. So I did spend a year doing accounting. And then when I stayed on at university and did the PhD, the natural step is then to stay in academia and research. So by the time I'd realised that none of those were for me, everybody, my peer group were all well established in what they'd decided to do. So and I went into the role in the NHS just because I don't even know. I must have just looked on a job site and I thought, performance management. Well, I've got some skills in performance management because I'm an accountant by background, and healthcare sounds interesting, so I'll go and have a go.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I did that for 4 years.
Okay.
And then I had my second child. So I've got 2 children.
Yeah.
And my youngest child, and at the time I was doing 2 or 3 nights a week away from home.
Yeah.
And I thought, actually, I need a job where I can go home every evening. And at that time, I was doing a secondment with the MOD and the Defence Medical Services.
Yeah.
So I went on the civil service job site, and that's how I ended up in Royal Mail, because at the time, Royal Mail was still public sector.
Of course, yes.
And so that was my kind of tangent into logistics. And I remember thinking, I need to do this role because I want to go home every night. And that was the real driving factor. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I wonder whether I'll feel the same passion about moving mail as I do about helping patients.
Yeah.
Which I needn't have worried about because, actually, once you get into logistics, you've got so much impact on so many things that are real people's lives that it does give you that same kind of sense of, I'm helping. I'm doing something to make people's lives better.
Yeah. So it sounds as though in that NHS role is when it started clicking for you that I might be in the right environment now and, be enjoying what I'm doing and using my skills. Is that right?
Yeah. And actually it wasn't as far away from logistics as I might have thought at the time. So when I was doing it, I wasn't thinking I'm working in logistics, but actually on reflection, I absolutely was. I was performance managing patient waiting lists. Well, that's all about flow. All about movement of patients through a service. It's about understanding what your demand is, how much capacity you've got, how quickly you can discharge people through the system. It is absolutely logistics. And so probably quite inadvertently, I'd already ventured into logistics without even really realizing it. And there's a lot that I learned in that role that, that probably still shapes what I do today, because the principles of it doesn't matter whether it's patients on a waiting list. It's, raspberries moving into Sainsbury's. It's, it's washing machines moving through the Argos network. It's the principles of logistics and movement and flow are all the same.
Yeah. And when you were in that role and you started to think, this is the kind of work I enjoy doing, what were the things that made you realize that you were in the right place?
In the NHS role?
Yeah.
I think it was just being able to see the difference that you're making.
Yeah.
When you're able to work, you're able to work through a process and you can see that, if I do these things and I improve that flow, I improve that journey, actually, I create an outcome that I can feel really proud of. Yeah. I can shorten a waiting list on for an operation. I can reduce the amount of time it takes for people to recover. You could influence what the outcome was for people involved in that whole process, whether that was doctors and nurses or whether that was patients. It was the ability to be able to influence things and make the outcome better for people.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so then you move into Royal Mail. So tell us about what that role was like and your first official foray into logistics.
Yeah. Well, the first role I did in Royal Mail was an amazing job. So I worked as part of their corporate strategy team in the run-up to privatisation, which was an incredible experience. So the government had obviously tried many times to privatise the mail, and they'd brought in a CEO from Canada, Moya Green, to lead that charge, and so I joined to help do the performance management piece. So when you privatise a company, then you have to have a clear strategy that you're performance managing against. That's what you have to communicate to the stock market. Your shareholders want to know, what is it you said you were going to deliver, and how are you progressing against that? So I worked as part of that strategy team, helping to develop A, the strategy, and B, how are we going to measure against it, that kind of corporate balance scorecard. And it was really great because it gave me a real insight into how a big organization operates. You know, how does a board set strategy? How does a board hold itself accountable? Why does the company worry about shareholders? You know, how does that impact the share price? All of those things about the mechanisms of how a big organization works, which I just learned a lot. I did that role for 18 months and learned just an enormous amount about how big organizations work. And now I sit on a board. So you know, it was a great grounding. To actually be able to kind of watch it from the outside. And, you know, I think there are roles you can do throughout your career, which might not be sort of core to what you want to do, but give you some really great insights and experiences, you know, particularly on graduate schemes and things. You know, if you can get an opportunity to interact with a board, to work with the board, even if it's just producing somebody's PowerPoint slides. You know, sometimes those insights into how organizations function can be really, really useful. So that was a great role, and I did that for 18 months, and then I moved to a new role, a commercial role. So I worked within the parcels part of the business on again doing performance management, but from a big corporate customer. So if you're an Amazon, or you're a Marks and Spencer's, or you're a Boots, and you are putting hundreds of thousands of parcels through the Royal Mail network, what are you experiencing as a retailer, and how do we measure that to make sure that you're getting the service that you need? So partly that, and then also working on new product development and the commercialization of that. So, you know, as you get to know what customers need, what their pain points are, how do you develop products and services to be able to meet those needs? And then how do you commercialize that and make money out of it? Because that's what businesses exist to do. So that was a really great grounding. So I'd kind of then done strategy, and then I'd done commercial and product development. And then I went on a training course, and it was one of these training courses where they bring lots of people from lots of different parts of the business. It was a sort of leadership training course. And I remember one evening chatting with my colleagues in operations, and at the end of it saying, I'd really love to do something operational. And they said, we've got just the person you should talk to. So off I went. To have a chat. And he said to me, we've got this site. It's the biggest site in the Royal Mail network. 60% of the nation's mail goes through that site every day. We're having a few challenges. Will you come and run it? And I went, okay. So I did. I had no idea. I'd never managed more than 4 people in my career. And all of a sudden, I took on a site that had 600 people on a normal day. And when we hit peak, we had over 1,000 people. I'm responsible for 60% of the mail in the UK. So off I went. And actually, because of the other things I did, in the end, I was probably really well equipped to do it, because running an operation like that is about understanding the principles of logistics, how things flow, how you plan, making sure your capacity meets demand, and keeping on top of those operational performance metrics. So my kind of bread and butter, although I'd sat on the outside looking in, measuring other people. Now I was the person being measured and needed to deliver it. But that kind of background in understanding the principles of how it worked. And then the second bit is just about engaging with people. Because if you've got high engagement in your colleagues, again, if people know why they come to work, and they feel valued for it, put those two together, and most of the time operations will run quite well, save for some sort of external shock that tries to trip you up. But understand your processes, focus on your people, and that was it. That was the beginning of being in a role that was logistics operations, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. That was probably the hardest role in my career. It was a 24/7 site, so for 2.5 years, you are you've got a team, but you can't feel responsible all the time for it. If something goes wrong, you're there at a weekend with your sleeves rolled up, helping out. So it was a tough job, but it was probably one of my favourite jobs.
And what did you love most about it?
Oh, just the people. People. If I had to leave, I had to plan at least an hour to get out of the building, because I spend a lot of time engaging with colleagues. I knew most of them by name. I knew what was going on in their families, what they were interested in at work. And so I couldn't leave the building without having, 30 conversations with people, which was brilliant. I just planned it into my time. But the more I was able to invest in people, in understanding people, in helping them understand their why about they were at work, the more value and benefit I got back from just having a team of people who would, be behind us regardless of what challenge, we come across. So it was definitely the people aspect of it.
Although the viewers might experience this in a very different context, but can you give us some tips for, how you dealt with, going from that leading 4 people to, leading 600, sometimes 1,000 people? Because I'm guessing it must have, been a big deal and a steep learning curve to get there.
Absolutely. And I didn't always get it right. Sometimes you make the wrong decision. Sometimes you are under pressure to make a decision or respond in the moment, and you don't always get it right. We're all learning, and you don't intend to get it wrong, but things do. Either things outside your control happen, or you make a decision that's the wrong decision. And I think that's what comes back to that resilience piece about just being able to say, do you know what, tomorrow's another day. I've learned from it, packed it away. That's an experience that I can use to help me going forward, and then just go again. It's about just, packing them all away. Everybody has to do something for the first time at some point in their career. It's probably a little bit more scary when you do it at a senior level as opposed to a more junior level. But you just have to be resilient to learning from those experiences, and just put a smile on your face the next day and go back at it. But just keep going.
I heard a really nice expression the other day. The word fail, you could read that as failure is it was first attempt in learning. And that's really true, isn't it? Because no one's perfect. No one's going to know what they're doing on the first time. And often it is our failures that teach us the valuable lessons in life.
Exactly. Those are the experiences that really make you, make you what you are. And it's your ability to learn from them, I think, and, be able to reflect and say, okay, that perhaps wasn't the best decision I made. But I'll know next time to do something different. And if you can package those all up as you move through your career, it makes it much easier. And then when you get a bit older, then you can be very wise and you can share those experiences with other people, and hopefully not help them not to make them, because everybody needs to make mistakes to learn, but you can help people to be comfortable with the fact that, you know what, we've all gone through it. We've all lived to tell the tale afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So after managing this main site for Royal Mail, what happens next?
So then I went on to do another operational role, and I managed the final mile delivery. So I managed all of the final mile deliveries in the West Midlands. So about 4,000 postmen and women. So that was a very different challenge, because having sat in a site that you could wrap your arms around and you could speak to colleagues every day. I then go to a role which is also operational, but you've got much less control. So you've got to work through your team. You become you've got to learn to be much more strategic. You know, how do you set that direction? How do you hold people accountable to deliver it? How do you manage underperformance? But also really thinking about, how do you still maintain that engagement with people? How do you make sure you don't become too detached from from what's happening every day on the floor? And in that role, one of the things that I did twice a year is, we, as a whole senior leadership team, we would do a back to the floor day. And for one day, twice a year, I'd have the whole team out on delivery. Again, brilliant. In the delivery offices, sorting the mail, then out on delivery with a couple of postmen or women. Again, just making sure that you remember what it is people do. So when you're making those decisions, you've kind of got a bit of experience. Otherwise, you can become very detached, and you can make a lot of decisions that have a lot of impact without necessarily really understanding what the full impact of that might be. So quite a different leadership role. So and then from there, I went to DHL, and that's how I ended up in DHL.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing. That's a really interesting journey. And at what point did your husband say, you see, logistics?
He's clearly said it a lot of times. So. And particularly when I'm and my husband does logistics as well, and when I come home and it's been a particularly tough day, and he'll say, remember back when you thought logistics was really simple? And I say, yes, I know, I've learned. And I was quick to dismiss it. Often, sometimes, when I'm talking to colleagues of mine in logistics, we'll often say logistics is somewhere people end up when they don't know what they want to do. Who thinks I'm going to have a career in logistics? But actually, we probably need to demystify it, because they're really fun careers. They are, they're really busy, really challenging, really quite fun careers where you've got the opportunity to have a real impact on people, and that sense of satisfaction that you've delivered something. And so, hopefully sessions like this help to help. I mean, people, me back then would have said, I want to go in logistics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. When you look back on your career journey, Natalie, what's been the high?
I think I would have to say making it to where I am now. I am, particularly in an industry that is still very male dominated. And that's changing. When you look at the intake at a graduate level, it's rapidly changing. But it will take time for those, for that diversity to really flow through. But in my early career, I'd kind of looked up and thought I'd love to be in one of those roles one day. So it's been a real that's probably been a real high to have to have that sense of sometimes slightly frightening. I did it. I did it.
Oh, thank you. And what about the biggest challenge when you look back on your career journey, or a limiting belief or a failure you had to overcome?
Definitely the biggest challenge was running that NDC. Just because that's probably where I had to learn the most and the quickest. And that was certainly the place where I experienced the most failures. Not all because of my decisions, but just because it is a very challenging environment, and it's so easy for it to go wrong. I was really lucky in that role that I had an amazing manager, and I remember to this day, there'd been a failure overnight. Lots of mail had not moved. It wasn't a decision I made. It was just, the coming together of lots of things meant that just didn't flow. And so mail didn't get where it needed to go, which is a big thing. It's a really big thing. People are expecting those items. And I remember driving up the M1 on my way to work thinking, how have we done it again? And I remember my boss calling me and he said, Natalie, you didn't get up yesterday and say, today we're going to fail. You didn't make it fail. You are fixing it. You are leading the improvement in what we're doing. Just keep going. Don't let anybody make you think you failed. And it's really stuck with me. It's really influenced how I have managed people that worked for me, because it would have taken an awful lot of resilience, and I am probably naturally quite a resilient person. But, at that stage, for somebody to say, I trust you, I believe in you, I know it's gone wrong, but I absolutely have got faith that you are the right person to lead this, just gives you that confidence to keep going.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice, isn't it? And I think that it makes me think about intention. And I think I think your average person intends to do their best and great work, and things do happen, but it's very unlikely that they intended to muck it up or fail, as your old manager said.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, if you give people permission that that's okay, they're more likely to wave a flag early. And so you've actually got more opportunity to be able to support and coach and limit, what the impact of that is. So, having that acceptance that failure is part of what we do sometimes. But that's okay. I can put my hand in the air and say, I think I've got a problem. And that triggers people to come and help, not to point the finger and say, look at what you've done. I think really helps to develop some really strong leaders for the future. Yeah, absolutely. We've touched on it there, but I was really keen to understand the the importance of mentors and sponsors and role models on your career journey. Can you share a bit more about that, please? Yeah, no, that has been hugely important. I've had a number of sponsors and mentors through my career. It's mentoring can be quite a personal thing, and I think sometimes people can give up on it quite quickly, because I don't know, you can have an expectation that it's going to be some sort of magic potion that's going to change things, but actually it's about building that network and people getting to know you. And as you progress through your career, it's really important to have those mentors and those sponsors who can support you. I remember quite early in my career going to a presentation. It was about women.
Yeah.
It was a sort of women's event, and this lady came to speak to us, and she talked about the fact that 95% of executive level roles are never advertised. When they survey people, did you apply for a job? 95% of people will say no. It was a conversation, it was a tap on the shoulder. And that was quite early in my career. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if I want to get up there, how do I put myself in a position where I'm the person having the tap on the shoulder? And creating that network within your business, using those sponsors and those mentors, to help you with your day job, but also just so that people know you and what you're about and what your ambitions are. Is really important. I had an interesting conversation with somebody recently about a job that was advertised, and applying for it or not applying for it, even if you think you're not going to get it. And I talked about one of my own experiences of applying for something I knew didn't have my name on it. I wasn't going to get the job, but it helped me move forward because it stated my ambition about what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it gave me that opportunity. And again, that opened doors to sponsorship and mentoring. And, it's really important to help you progress through your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would definitely, if you've got the opportunity, stick with it. You don't have to meet with somebody every week or every month, even if it's a drop in every 6 months. Keep those relationships alive, because you never know when you might need them.
Yeah.
Interestingly, now in my role, I've got people who've been sponsors and mentors of mine through my career who now work in organisations that I might want to do business with.
Yeah.
So, as well as helping through my career, these are now people who I go out and talk to as links into companies that I want to do business with. So, it's great. It's great building that network.
Absolutely. And for somebody who's maybe early in their career or not quite started yet, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, it must be really nerve-wracking, finding mentors and sponsors and so on. As someone who I imagine has been mentor and sponsor to many other people, what I guess comfort would you give them about approaching somebody?
I would say that it's one of the things that I really enjoy about my role. I love it. If I've had a really busy week and I've got a mentoring session with somebody, it's brilliant. It's an opportunity to kind of switch off, step back, listen to somebody else. You learn as a mentor. You learn a lot about what's going on in your business by being open to those conversations. But it's also great to be able to have the opportunity to to share some of those experiences that helped you get to where you get to. So I would say, don't worry about seeking those out. Most people who mentor actually get quite a lot out of it. It's quite a nice opportunity to just, sit back, have a coffee, and help somebody work through their challenges, or just, share some advice. Or sometimes when I'm mentoring people, sometimes they just want to know what goes on in the bigger picture of our business, the things that I would see that they wouldn't see. So, it can be really quite satisfying for both parties. So go out and seek those mentors.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so for somebody who is thinking, I really like the sound of logistics, I want to find out more. Are there any specific educational or training routes you'd recommend, or?
So the place, if you were interested in a career in logistics, the first place I would go is to an organisation called generationlogistics.org. You can look it up. It is a collaboration between the two biggest industry bodies in logistics. So Logistics UK, which is a big trade body, and the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, which would be the other professional body for logistics. They've come together in about the last 12 months. They're sponsored by all sorts of logistics organisations, all sorts of companies throughout the UK. And it's a fantastic resource that gives you case studies. It gives you access to people, to mentoring, to events. And it is all about trying to open or demystify some of the, demystify logistics for people coming into our industry. So, great. It's a great set of resources.
No, that sounds fantastic. Thank you. And it sounds as though, you're from an accounting background. So it sounds as though a variety of educational backgrounds would be suited, especially given, the myriad roles available within a logistics department. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You don't have to work in logistics. You don't have to have a specific degree. You don't even need to have a degree. There are all sorts of entry routes. There are, you can just come in. You can come in for a graduate scheme, but there's an awful lot now of apprenticeship schemes.
Great.
It's really great to see. One of the things that I really am proud about within DHL, but not just DHL, when you look at logistics across the UK, there are now lots of different routes in, and people entering the workforce. There's all sorts of different reasons why people want to follow different routes. And what's really great is that we now offer those different routes, and actually they're all equally weighted. It doesn't matter whether you come in as a graduate, whether you come in as an apprentice. If you just come in, at the bottom level and work up, there is no preconception, no prerequisite that you've got to have ticked these boxes, to get to certain places. And if I look at our senior leadership team and the leadership team that work for me, they've all come in different routes. And that actually is really good, because it creates a real diversity of thought and capability that makes us much more successful. So, lots of different routes, and absolutely no prerequisites. People join with all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different backgrounds.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you. Natalie, what about soft skills? Are there any soft skills or people skills that you'd call out as skills that would be very, very valuable for somebody who would like to get into logistics?
We touched on it earlier. Is that it's a very people-intensive industry. Even with robotics, it is still a lot of people. So so you absolutely do need to have those soft people skills. Although there are lots of roles in logistics that don't necessarily have lots of people responsibility. So there is probably a role that suits everybody, regardless of what your skill set is. It's about understanding where your skills fit best. But from a people perspective, I think it is about listening. It's about active listening and being able to stop, listen, process, and use that information to understand what makes somebody else tick. What gets them out of bed in the morning, what's important to them, and how do I then link that back to the mission that I'm trying to drive. And it's that ability to stop and listen and really actively listen, hear what somebody's got to say, not what you think they're saying, what they're actually saying, and be able to use that to find a way to motivate them. I think that's becoming more important. I think as we see new generations coming through the workforce, I think we're seeing a huge amount of diversity and a huge variety of different expectations within the workforce. And you've got to understand those if you're going to find a way of connecting and engaging those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one size does not fit all. It's you have to listen to people and listen to them as individuals. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I guess for a team member rather than a people leader within logistics, the words that I heard you talking about throughout the conversations are things like collaboration and communication and resilience and those kinds of things. Any others to add there?
I mean, the collaboration piece is really important. Communication. I think the other one is probably empathy.
Yeah.
And really, really being able to empathize with people and understand people.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's, sometimes we think it's all just about, telling people what to do and get on with it. But, we're dealing with people. And people have got different needs. And I think being able to have that empathy in the way that you lead is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As well as empathy for the end user, right?
Yeah.
And remembering why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding that, when you're moving food into a supermarket, if you get it late, that's a store manager who's got customers in his store giving him a hard time about why that section of the shelf is empty. Absolutely being able to empathize with the impact of what you're doing. And that goes both ways, actually, because when you get it right, having that empathy actually helps you to feel a real great sense of satisfaction that, we've nailed it. We've absolutely made somebody's day because we got the right things to the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. What does the future hold for logistics?
Oh, I think I touched on it earlier. The two big things for me are sustainability, and how we take that carbon footprint away from logistics. We use a lot of fuel, whether that's in vehicles, in aeroplanes, in boats. Whether it's the emissions from our buildings, whether it's waste that we produce as part of that process. So how do we solve some of those big sustainability issues? And I think we're a long way from being able to get to that place, but we need to work at it really quickly. And I think that's a really exciting journey to be part of at the moment. So I think there's a piece around sustainability and how we build sustainable logistics networks for the future. And then I think there's a piece around digitization. And whether that is robotics, whether that is data and how we use data, and how we use data science in a way that we've never used before. Again, links back to sustainability. If you can use data to optimize, the more you optimize, the less waste there is, the less carbon you're burning unnecessarily. But those new technology developments, I think will be really exciting. So those are probably the big two things in terms of the future of logistics for me. So great, it's a great time to join.
It's not slowing down.
We're really at the beginning. We're still at the beginning of those journeys. I love to go into a site and stand back and watch the robots moving things around, and I just think, wow, it's like something from the space age. It's something I might have watched as a movie as a child, and now it's happening right in front of me. It's really, really exciting. Really exciting.
I live in Cambridge, and there's a pilot going on round near where I live at the moment with these little white robots, and they have a flag, and they deliver they deliver, I think, groceries. I think it's just a partnership between the company and the co-op at the moment, but just seeing them kind of just going along the streets, it's so cute.
Yeah, exactly. Near where I live in Milton Keynes, they have the same. And my kids think it's a brilliant day out to go and watch the robots in Milton Keynes. And you're right. At the moment, they deliver small takeaway orders and things like that. And convenience stores, small. I've forgotten the sugar or the butter or whatever. I remember looking not that long ago about autonomous vehicles for, delivering large item goods. So, at what point in the future will we be able to deliver a washing machine by a robot? Drones, we're seeing it with drone deliveries, aren't we? And
wow.
it will be
exciting times.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Aww. Yeah.
Well, Natalie, as we move towards wrapping up, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were, just starting out on your career journey?
It's a really interesting question, because I didn't set out with a plan at the beginning to be where I am.
Yeah.
And I've kind of followed a sort of twists and turns type career path. And I'm really, I really love where I've ended up.
Yeah.
And so, I think just enjoying the journey, just enjoy the journey. And, if you're ambitious, you'll get there, but it'll take twists and turns, along the way.
Yeah.
And I probably wasn't prepared for that when I set out.
Mm-hmm.
But now I look back, I think every one of those twists and turns has made me what I am.
Yeah.
And without all of those experiences, I wouldn't have the breadth that helps me do my job today. So just to go with the flow of sometimes it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
And you might not end up where you thought you were going to end up when you started out, but as long as you're enjoying the journey, just keep learning from those experiences.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because so many people, leave uni or go to uni, leave uni or their, education, and they don't have a plan, and that can feel really daunting. But sometimes it's just about taking the first step and then the next step. And as you showed, there were some moves along your journey that weren't quite right. So the Xerox and the lecturing, but you still did it. You learnt skills, and then you pivoted, and you've managed to navigate this career into a really successful place where you're really happy. And I think it just goes to show that it's okay not to have a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that feels daunting, but it certainly hasn't held me back. So, and in fact, it's probably made for quite an exciting career along the way.
Yeah. Natalie, what's your favourite quote or mantra or expression that you enjoy?
Oh, I would say my favourite quote, and I read this. One of my very good friends has got it up on the wall in a little downstairs toilet, and I remember reading it and thinking, do you know what, that is very me. And it's the one that goes, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And I think, when I read it, I thought that really sums up a lot about, my life and my career. And my boss, previous boss, for the last 4 years, he often says to me, Natalie, you're one of the most resilient people I know. And I think, I'm not sure I'm resilient. I've just learned that actually dancing in the rain is quite fun. Yeah. Just enjoy it. And so that's the one for me that I reflect on.
That's great advice. Thank you. Okay, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Are there any final words of wisdom or encouragement that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Just to say, it's been brilliant to talk to you today, Jo, and I hope that there's some nuggets in there that people will find useful. Yeah. I hope it inspires somebody somewhere to come and join logistics, and to make a conscious effort to go out and find out some more. So hopefully, if we've achieved that, it will be a great outcome. I have enjoyed my career. I still enjoy my career hugely. Yeah. So if we can inspire some other people to follow follow that same journey, that'd be brilliant.
Well, I've worked in HR and so on for over 20 years, and I've learnt so much today. So I am sure that the audience are going to learn loads too and get loads of valuable nuggets. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining Natalie and I today. We really hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you found any value in today's episode, please help us out by subscribing to the podcast and sharing with your friends. And if you have any questions, comments or suggestions, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.